Hi everybody, happy fall. I'm Carisa Bunten with Spoonful of Jelly with the Lawrenceburg Public Library and you. I'd like to thank the Friends and the library itself for sponsoring our programs and kits, and most importantly you for expressing interest, registering, and coming in and checking them out. So for this month we're going to do sage, which I think is very seasonal and timely. It pairs well with a lot of the cooking and baking and food prep that we're doing this time of year. We noticed that there's a lot of different types of sage, even incense sage, and now kind of like hybrid sage with like different mint and chocolate flavors. But the sage that's in your bag and in your glaze, and that I got from Frontier for you, is the Salvia officinalis. So that's the classic culinary and oftentimes used interchangeably medicinal sage. So it's not the hybridized one, it's just the true blue sage. And in culinary uses, it has a very strong and pungent flavor and scent as well. When you open up your bag, you're going to get an instant whiff of it. And it has notes of mint, and that would make sense because sage, Salvia officinalis, and mint are in the same family of plants. They have square stems and get kind of like low-grade, woodsy, perennial, shrub-like growths after a few years. Eucalyptus, lemon, and a slight hint of pepper. So if you were going to pair it with flavors or talk about its notes, those would be the notes that you would recognize within sage itself. And just an aside, sage and lemon pair really, really well together in almost any combination. So just sort of keep that in mind if you get creative and have a little bit left and you want to just sort of try to create your own blend. A lemon or a lime, and sometimes orange, depending on what you pair it with, pair really well with sage and kind of cut through the flavor of that sort of medicinal kind of astringency that can turn some people off. So it's a good way to blend it in and mix it for rubs and future recipes. It's generally sold, stored, and used dried, and that's what you guys have in your bag. It has an extended shelf life, which means it's probably not going to go bad anytime soon, in literally years, especially if you leave it in this nice little wax lined bag. And if it ever does go bad, how you'll start to tell, or kind of when it's waning or on its way out, is it starts to get lighter and lighter in color and kind of becomes pale and sort of a brownish and loses its green, sage green color, right? And that would be the way you could tell that it would be ready to replace. Ours, meaning what's in your kit here, is crushed, and that means that they just take the two leaves and they literally rub them back and forth together and create friction, and it's not ground into a powder, so then you have a little bit more texture. But just to let you guys know, it can be kind of in the herb world, lots of times it's called webby or sticky, and so when you get it, it kind of has a tendency to clump. So like when you're going to use it as a ending garnish or to mix in with salt, you have to use a mortar and pestle or really be sure to kind of pull it and pluck it apart, because it has an incredibly high oil content, the sage oil, and that's one reason that gives it such a strong flavor and aroma. So when that oil, once you crush and rub the leaves together and it sits, it can kind of gum up and make your plant matter sort of get webby or sticky. So if you notice that with your sage, that's why. Since it's super easy to grow around here and affordable and oftentimes a perennial for several years in our region, especially with our milder winters, I wanted to mention that you can use it fresh just as a garnish or added to salads, and then it'll flower too late summer, early fall. These long kind of spike-like flowers, they're usually like a purple or a light pink. And you can pluck and use those for just like fun garnishes on cakes or in salads, or just to munch or let your little kids like explore with garden tastes. So since a lot of us probably have a patch of this growing in our yard or garden, I wanted to mention to you that you can certainly dry it and harvest it yourself, but also when it's fresh and out, you can use it freely. So it makes a really good tea too. Remember when we did the year tea last year? A true tea would have Camellia sinensis. So by definition, this would be a tisane, which would be something you would prepare like a tea, but it actually doesn't contain the tea leaf. It's really herbaceous and kind of medicinal and drying, and it's very oftentimes used and prescribed for weaning when you're trying to stop nursing and get your milk to dry up and change flavor. so you can naturally wean with the baby, like kind of tandemly, because it changes the flavor, it makes your milk dry up, and it's just a really good weaning key. It's also good, it's in your handout, for like when you get those loose kind of wet coughs that sort of hang on, and or like a wet, dry, like runny nose. So just in general, it's drying. You can also put little pinches of it into like rabbit timothy hay and things like that. Rabbits lots of times in the winter with the change of season will get the snuffles, and just a little bit of the culinary sage and with their timothy hay lots of times kind of dries up their nose and sinuses and keeps them from getting that weepy kind of eyes and nose that they have a tendency to get in the fall. There's recipes in the handout, and it's a classic sage stuffing, which to me, when I think of like a Thanksgiving Day stuffing, this is what I think of. Super simple ingredients, so it's just any sort of bread that you would like. We always just pick like a combination of the ends of many loaves. Celery, onions and garlic, your sage, a little bit of butter, chicken or turkey stock, eggs, salt and pepper. And you probably all who are watching this have made this or have your own little variation, but the dried sage in your kit worked into it is really, really, really good. And then your simple syrup, we're experimenting with syrups. This is vegan and plant-based, and what it has in it is water, sugar, sage, obviously, and it's the exact same sage in your your kit, your take-home. I did an ounce in a muslin bag and steeped it and made a really, really strong tisane. Lemon juice, and remember how we talked about earlier how lemon and sage pair particularly well together. And then pectin, and pectin kind of gives it that thickness and makes it a little more viscous and not runny like water. And so you would use it as a glaze, and if you did that, you would add the last 10 minutes of baking, and I think like your Thanksgiving Day turkey with your sage stuffing, or like a pork roast or a lamb roast. It does really well with like rich proteins and kind of, intensely fatty meats. So you're going to add it the last 10 minutes of baking and then let it kind of cool down or bake, or you're going to bake your roast or your turkey or whatever and pull it out when it's done and brush it on, kind of like you would brush on egg whites to a pastry. And then you put it under there and you quickly broil it, and it'll kind of like caramelize and make like a little shell and darken on it, sort of like a crust of sorts. And another way to use your syrup, you could also use it in cocktails, but we're going to stay on the wagon for these suggestions this month, is just a teaspoon, and a teaspoon is very little. You could use your measuring teaspoon to 8 ounces of tea as well as like a sweetener. And you could add it to your sage tea or use it in place, or add it to a green tea or a black tea, but basically is like an herbaceous sweetener. The dried sage, again, can be used in stuffings. I mean, that's kind of my go-to use for it. I just pretty much always use it in any sort of stuffing I make or starch. Pickling, salt rubs, when we did salts a few years ago, and we're going to do smoked salt next month, so you can save a little bit of it, because remember how pungent and strong it is. And mix it just even parts in a mortar and pestle, or even in a bowl, or blend it with your hands and do like a rub on a roast, like a rib roast or something. And it does really well with that too. And so again, there's a recipe for stuffing in your handout, the exact ingredients of your syrup, and lots of other fun factoids, and the specific names and whatnot of your Salvia officinalis sage. So for next month, we're going to do smoked salt, 2 kinds, and 2 different kinds of grinds or grades or textures. And then in conclusion, for the holiday month, in the month of October going into November, when we're all starting to prepare and make our savory foods and get ready for our Thanksgiving Day menu, we did sage, Salvia officinalis, the classic culinary and medicinal sage. Everybody has a 1/2 ounce certified organic from Frontier Natural Food Co-op, and then a nice little 2-ounce jar of your simple syrup and or glaze. So thanks a lot. We'll see you next month for the smoked salt. Save a little of your sage for that, because you'll want to use it for your holiday cooking, and we appreciate it.